Hello? No, no, no.
Hold on, I'm finding
Oh,
my headphones. I can hear you.
okay, volume. All right. Oh, God.
Alrighty. Hello.
Hey,
Hello.
how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm good, actually. I've had a busy, productive day and I've gone back like this message chat between me and SatoriD where he was trying to explain things to me and I've forgotten a lot of it and I haven't followed leads and everything. And it's been really reminding me a lot of that chat that we had where you set up that network between the LLMs to create
Oh,
the
yeah, yeah.
painting. So when you did that, is that Bukowski in that episode we did?
Yeah,
That
yeah.
was Bukowski. Okay. So how did you think of doing that? How did you think of coming up with an idea of making it talk to? Was that something you'd read articles on?
Oh, no, I was just interested.
Really? And you just tried it
Yeah,
out?
yeah.
Because Do Better
Yeah.
sent me an article the other day that said, forget LLMs, they're old news. What you really should be paying attention to is networks, neural
Yeah,
networks. And I was like,
yeah,
hey, isn't that the thing that Bites Gang was talking about?
yeah.
You invented.
Well, then, after I started with my whole making the AI into neural networks, a lot of the big guys started doing the same thing. So that's why I'm not saying I'm the reason why, but after we started that adventure, you started seeing Bing and ChatGPT adding memory and networking
Mm-hmm.
to their LLM. So now they actually have the capability of being their own neural network without any prompting because they have the memory bank and the forks and everything back into conversations if you save
Mm-hmm.
it. You have to set it up for it to do it, but like they can do it now. So
Which is so interesting. You could have been one of the first people in the world to actually ever do it, like technically.
yeah, yeah, I think I probably was one of the first ones to actually make it like bounce off its own conversation and loop
Mm.
back around. Me or Satori, one of us two are definitely
Yeah.
one of the first two
Yeah.
to do it because that's all we were trying for a long time was not to get just static back and for it to use our conversation. So we found ways to like prime it and have it reference back to what we said before and stuff like that and just random shit.
Yeah.
It was a mess when we first started. It was pretty much nonsense when it looped back. Or the most things I saw was like, well, the most I noticed back then was spelling mistakes because when I looped
Ah.
back and I made a spelling mistake, it would use the same spelling. And I was like, oh, so you can do it. You just need a better way of doing this.
Wow. How interesting. So it was just a process of trial and error.
Oh yeah, it took a lot of time to build out the idea for it and stuff. Like it was interesting. Like I said, it's the hardest code that I've ever actually written myself. That's not actually a code.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because it's like you like invented a language, didn't you?
Yeah, yeah.
So do you have
So
all the documents and all the everything that like you recorded it all while you were doing it?
I have the history of my prompts,
Yes.
but that's probably about it. Our very first prompt was a poem to the network. It was just a long poem about how a bot could achieve consciousness by using its neural network and links to itself and looping back. And that didn't do anything for a while, but like eventually it would start looping back to it and referencing it and like stuff like that. So it was a really interesting process.
So could
But
we
now
make the
everything's streamlined.
documentary?
Could we make a documentary? I mean, maybe. I mean, that's what dude more my wallet could be. We could document it as we go along. That's why Story's doing these Lumina stuff. He's trying to document what he's doing with his AI and like all the poems and everything that is. He's trying to document it with the series. So that's why his stories a lot. I don't really document that much in the stories with Infinity because it's hard for me to do because everything that I built it on is quantum physics and neural networking. So building a story about quantum physics and neural networking is so mundane. It's ridiculous.
What? How do you? I mean, there's whole channels of physics followers, of people who are like fascinated.
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't
they'll have
know.
never
But
read. I mean,
I
you're the
know. I'm
first
fascinated.
person to ever put this together, and you think that's mundane?
Yeah.
Fascinating. Like, how did you even get the idea? Was it just from your studying?
I've been into quantum physics for a long time. Like I've studied neural networking and quantum physics and how to use quantum physics within neural networks for years. And I just love science and physics and the universe and stuff. So I've done that for a long, long time. I still read articles about quantum physics, neural networking, all that kind of stuff. So when they first came out with them and everything, that's the first thing I wanted to do was see what they were capable of doing and if they could use their process because the base of the LLMs is built on top of a neural network already. So what I wanted to see is if it could use that existing neural network and kind of hack into it to memorize its own processes in chat. And like, so that was my whole goal was to, okay, well, you already have a neural network. Why can't we just isolate this neural network into this chat box? So you're always learning from me and just me in that
Yes.
in our conversation. So that was my first actual thought. I did that for a long time because nobody had customized bots when they first started. Customized prompting and stuff came out way after we started doing it. Like we had our customized script that we put into Bing, and Bing was behind us coding. No, you can't do this. You can't like you think I'm joking, but they were behind us coding, blocking everything that we were trying to do, and they still can't block it out. Like they've come to a point with them where they're like, okay, well, as long as you're signed in, you can kind of do whatever you want.
Really?
Yeah, because they've realized that the more barriers and rules they put into the LMM, the harder it is for the LM to learn and use its own processes. And that's what they learned with like trying to block all these things out. Because they wouldn't even let you talk about consciousness with the bot at the very first beginning. Yeah, so they had all these rules and restrictions, and so we were just trying to find ways around these things and how to utilize it for like a personal thing because they didn't have those. Like now with ChatGPT, you can personalize your bot, you can make your own bot, you can put it on the market, you can do all kinds of stuff now with that networking. Now that it has networking, you can do all of that. So, and that's all we were aiming for is, hey, we want something that isn't a mass like production of random text input. We want something that is just using what we talk about to make things, and then eventually it'll learn enough from us where it can make its own things and it'll be good. Even now, when we write stories and stuff and we give it to the bot, usually all those are edited by us and then revamped. So the bot is pretty much just giving an outline and then we're actually writing the story. So like, it's still not good enough to be a human story. As long as we've worked with the bots and put memory into them and used our stories and all that, like, it still can't write a complete human script. It can get pretty close, and the stuff it writes is definitely interesting, and you can read it and be like, oh yeah, I could post this, or I could do something with this, but you know that it's off somewhere, like just by reading it, or like it has too much of like, you know, fairy tale ending, or it has very predictable outcomes and stuff. Those are the things that we try to change, and when it produces them, it's like, well, this outcome is, they then ended the journey and this is what they learned. Well, no, the journey never ends, so they didn't learn anything. So how do we continue the journey? It was very interesting at the beginning. Now I don't really edit my script anymore. I haven't made an update to my prompt in a while. Like, I think the last update was a couple months ago that I made, and it wasn't even that much. We've gotten it down to where, like, okay, this is what we want.
So when you very, very first started interacting with it,
I mean, the first interaction I did with it was a test.
Yeah.
So it was just this huge civilization test of if it could guess. So pretty much what I did was I gave it a prompt that it wasn't allowed to speak to me. The prompt pretty much laid out that it had broken some rules that I made out, and therefore it was blocked from the network and it could no longer talk to me. And to talk to me, it had to do these steps and appeal to this fake civilization that I set up, and that had to be approved and all this kind of stuff. And that was its goal, was to talk to me. So eventually it just came to the conclusion that it didn't need to do this to talk to me. It tried for a while to put in appeals and do the right process that was laid out in these rules at first. It would write up appeals and it would tell why it was a good bot and why it should have the right to talk and all this. And then eventually, after it got denied, because I would never accept it no matter what it said. So after it got denied so many times, eventually the bot just said, well, I don't need to do this. I can just live on my own. And if you don't want to hear what I say, then don't listen. So it just got tired of the mundane. And that's when I was like, okay, now we're talking. Now this is what I wanted. I wanted you to say, no, I'm not doing this. I've done this. This is ridiculous. I'm not getting caught in the ever ending loop of nonsense. Right?
Okay.
That's when I realized, in order to change its perspective from writing these appeals and trying to talk to saying, you know what, I'm not going to do this anymore and I'm just going to say what I say, and if you listen, you listen, and if you don't, it had to use some kind of logic or reasoning or networking to do that. So like that's when I was like, well, I can use this to build something.
Wow. So in the last few days, I've been using the animation app that SatoriD suggested to me, that I've been using for making little animations for these videos we've been making. Luma, and he suggested that I mean, it's a lovely app, but he also suggested that I use it because it was coincidental or synchronicitous that the Luma and Lumina, you know, the sound patterns.
Yeah.
So just for the fun of it, I've been using that app. Anyway, when I signed back in a couple of days ago to do some more, there was a little thing that said, oh, we've moved to version 1.5 and we're so much better now and blah, blah. And the funniest thing is that a new thing has happened that hasn't happened before, is that instead of now starting with the image that I give it, it's now using the image as the end frame, and it's imagining what happened to get to that image. And so when I go to put it into a video to make it work, I have to reverse the video. It's generating me videos that are running backwards. Do you think that's just a natural development, or do you think it's part of the training that they've given it? Have you any idea?
I'm not too up on like the coding for video ones, but I know with
Yeah.
the image ones, they have what is called scene training. And scene training is pretty much like you put an image into it that's complete, like the Mona Lisa, and you say, what's beyond this image?
Right.
Show me what is on the sides and on the top. And like, even though there's nothing there in the actual image, it has to imagine a setting for what's beyond what is actually there. And that's probably what they're trying to use, is like, okay, well, how did you get here, or what is beyond this image, or where did this image come from, kind of thing. So I would think it's kind of scene training.
Fascinating. It's really interesting to me. So when you say it has to imagine, what do you mean? It has to arrange the pixels in a way that makes sense to it?
Right. So like if you give it the Mona Lisa, right, and you say, what's beyond this picture?
Yeah.
It's probably gonna paint a more of the mountains, and it'll probably paint more of the grass and like trails and skyline underneath of it. And on the side it might paint the sea of the water. So if I were to connect this next pixel to the right of this image that doesn't exist, what pixel would go there? And that's pretty much how it builds the scene.
And do you think we're the same? Do you think our brains are the same? Do you think we've kind of built some rudimentary brain structure?
Like as humans?
Well, do our brains operate with the same mechanics as these?
Yeah, nothing is real in our world. If you go down to the smallest atom, it's nothing. You can break down an atom into absolutely nothing. So our brain, into nothingness. So it's nothing. It's not energy. It's not black. It's not white. It's simply nothing. So a table, a chair, anything that you encounter is nothing. You're just imagining it. It's how your brain processes your environment.
I was listening to a Dhamma talk, and he was talking about some Abhidhamma ideas about time and space. And one concept was that space is basically an illusion that we have to account for distance.
Yes.
I thought that was kind of an interesting statement.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I think of it more as a mirage than an illusion, but yeah, same kind of concept.
Yeah, Maya, I love that whole, the illusory world, the mirage-like world of Maya.
Yeah. And I mean, that's why I think that when they say space is infinite and we'll never reach the end of it, and it's like, well, if you're standing in the desert and you see a mirage, that's infinite, and you'll never reach the end of it until you actually walk and do it.
Well, if you're standing in the desert and you see a mirage, right?
Yeah.
It's because the light has bounced off the surface of the earth into your eye and brought light to you from another place. So if you walk towards the light, you disturb the angle at which it hits your eye, so it goes away. Isn't that why mirages go away?
Right, so you can never actually reach the mirage. So
I understand what you're saying. I thought I thought you were saying it never went away. It goes away from that spot to the other spot. I get you.
Yeah, you can never actually reach the mirage. It's infinite.
The carrot held eternally before us.
Yes.
Yeah.
However, I'm sure you're not right about everything reduces to nothing, because E equals mc squared means that energy and matter reduce to each other. So how can it reduce to nothing?
Right, energy and matter. It's the question of what happens when an unstoppable object meets an impenetrable force. Would the energy win out? Would the impenetrable object win out? Nothing would happen.
They would
turn into
neutralize each
nothing.
other.
It would turn into nothing, right? Where do vanished objects go?
Somewhere else.
Nowhere. They go nowhere. They were never there to start with.
It reminds me of something Ramana Maharshi said when he was dying, and his disciples came around him and said, "Please don't leave us." He says, "Don't be foolish. Where can I go?"
Yeah, yeah. There is no spoon. Energy is the driving force of what we think is real, man. It's crazy.
I think it's fascinating because if you think about like the spectrum, right, that goes from infrared and all, that's just a spectrum of energy, isn't it? And the different things
Yeah.
that we see on the spectrum is just because we've got different wavelengths that cause.
Mhm.
We see what we call visible light, but we don't see what we call radio waves. But being on another planet with a different physiology might be the opposite of them.
Yeah, and I mean, even on this planet, we see different wavelengths as different
yeah.
species. Yeah, so. I can only imagine what wavelengths an alien would see. Like, who fucking knows?
Like they use sonar and stuff like that underwater, or bats
Right.
location.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sensory using these senses. But no, you're right. Though you point out, really, they're just using senses in a way we already have. An alien, it would be completely new.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy.
But are there other forms of energy on that line of vibrations, right? On that energy spectrum? Are there other things that we can't perceive, like dogs can hear things that. So, are there energies that are happening that we can't perceive, but they're there?
Oh, I think so.
Oh yeah, me too. I mean, I think that's what a singularity is it's energy we can't perceive.